What do you do when the woman you want has more options than a celebrity in Manhattan, and you're terrified she'll wake up one morning and decide you're not enough? Let's be real. Deep down, you already feel the competition breathing down your neck. Some guy with better looks, another with more money, another who texts her at 2 a.m. because he knows you won't. And the worst part? She entertains it. Maybe not openly, but you can feel it. The hesitation, the doubt, the tiny moments when she pulls back just enough to make your stomach twist. So here's the question that should punch you in the chest. How do you become the man she chooses? Not because she has no options, but because every other option looks like a downgrade. Most men sabotage themselves before they even start. They chase, they beg, they try to impress, they try to be nice, they play the safe game, the same predictable script she's bored of. The same script that never works on a woman who knows she has leverage. But you're about to learn something different, something darker, sharper, and dangerously effective. Because the truth is simple. Women with options don't choose the best man. They choose the man they feel they can't afford to lose. And that kind of pull doesn't come from compliments or romantic gestures. It comes from psychological gravity, the kind that pulls her thoughts back to you even when she's with someone else. The kind that makes her nervous when you go quiet. The kind that forces her to chase you without even realizing she's chasing. If you've ever been replaced, ignored, or treated like a backup plan, good. That pain is your fuel now. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to flip the entire power dynamic and make her choose you every single time, even when she swears she's confused. Stay locked in. You're about to learn the game she never wanted you to understand. Secret 1, the power of unseen value. You see, the difference between a man who is noticed and one who is chosen is often invisible to the untrained eye. Take Oliver, for instance, a 38-year-old entrepreneur in Manchester. He didn't have the jawline of a movie star or the six-pack of a gym fanatic, but there was something about him that made women gravitate toward him. It wasn't his clothes, his car, or even his accent. It was the way he carried himself. The quiet assurance that he was living a life full of purpose, challenge, and intrigue. He had a depth that couldn't be measured in Instagram likes or Tinder swipes. And that was precisely what made him irresistible. Unseen value is the art of being a mystery that women instinctively want to explore. Women don't chase what they can fully understand. They chase the unknown, the rare, the complex. When Oliver walked into a coffee shop in Leeds, women didn't know everything about him. They only knew fragments. A confident smile, a story hinting at travel to Paris for business meetings, a laugh that suggested he had adventures she could only imagine. Every action, every word was deliberate yet subtle, leaving room for curiosity to blossom. The secret here is control. High-value men never need to over-explain their lives or prove their worth. They operate from a position of independence. Oliver didn't text every woman he met immediately. He didn't flatter endlessly or overshare personal details. He lived his life first and let the world catch up. Women unconsciously begin to project their fantasies, ambitions, and desires onto a man like this. They begin to see him as a challenge, a goal, and a prize all in one. The psychological mechanism behind this is straightforward: scarcity and intrigue. If a man appears too available, too easy, too fully understood, he becomes predictable, and predictability kills desire. But when a man's value is unseen, when only glimpses are provided, women are forced to invest emotionally, to think about him, to compare every other man to him and fail. This unseen value becomes magnetic. Women subconsciously prioritize their attention toward the man who offers mystery, confidence, and independence. In practical terms, this means cultivating your own life relentlessly. Oliver spent mornings on his entrepreneurial ventures, afternoons in the gym or attending workshops, and evenings socializing selectively with friends and acquaintances. He never chased anyone. He created situations where women had to notice him. His value was so apparent in his lifestyle, but so subtle in his expression, that women started to compete for his attention, even without him realizing it. The takeaway here is simple but profound. The power of unseen value isn't about showing off, it's about being. Being confident, independent, mysterious, and fully engaged in your own trajectory. Women are drawn not to men who beg for attention, but to men whose lives are magnetic enough that attention is earned, not requested. Mastering this principle transforms you from one of many to the singular choice. without ever playing games overtly. Secret 2. Create irresistible tension. Tension is the invisible thread that pulls desire closer. Take Emma, sitting on a London rooftop bar caught between two men. One was predictable, available, and unremarkable. The other was enigmatic, playful, and subtly dominant. She laughed at his jokes. But it wasn't the humor alone that kept her hooked. It was the emotional electricity, the push and pull of unpredictability, the sense that he was just slightly out of reach. That man understood the art of irresistible tension, and Emma couldn't help but be drawn in. Tension is not conflict. It is emotional magnetism. It is the carefully crafted interplay of accessibility and distance, warmth and detachment, clarity and mystery. Women are wired to respond to men who are slightly unattainable because this scarcity triggers their investment mechanisms. When tension exists, women engage more deeply. They think about you, wonder about you, and even compete for your attention subconsciously. In practical application, this requires restraint and subtlety. You don't text back immediately. You don't overshare personal details. You let her feel the value of your presence by occasionally withholding it. For example, consider Lucas in Birmingham. He met a woman at a gallery opening, and rather than constantly messaging her, he sent short, intriguing texts that suggested he was living a full life. She felt compelled to respond, to match his energy, and to chase the emotional highs he created. Tension also thrives on unpredictability, small variations in behavior. A compliment here, a teasing comment there. A slight delay in replies create a rhythm that triggers emotional stimulation. Women become addicted to the unpredictability because it forces them to focus their attention on you, elevating their desire. Importantly, this isn't about playing childish mind games. It's about creating an environment where your presence is valued, your attention is earned, and your absence is felt. It's a psychological principle that exploits the natural female instinct to invest in high-value men who are not fully accessible. Consider Mia, a marketing professional in Leeds. She found herself intrigued by a man who rarely confirmed plans immediately, but always delivered engaging, stimulating conversations when he did. She didn't just like him, she wanted him. The tension he created was irresistible because it tapped directly into her emotional wiring. Other men could offer constant availability, predictable affection, or instant validation, but none of them elicited the same psychological pull. Mastering irresistible tension requires two things: emotional discipline and strategic unpredictability. You must be fully engaged in your own life while remaining subtly unpredictable in interactions. You must provide moments of emotional highs and controlled distance. Women will chase not because you demand it, but because the tension you create activates deep psychological triggers, curiosity, desire, and emotional investment. When executed properly, tension transforms the dynamic from passive interest to active pursuit. You no longer chase, you pull. You no longer compete, you dominate the psychological landscape. Women become invested not just in you, but in the game of winning your attention. And that is the secret. Tension makes women choose you, even when there are multiple other options. Secret 3. The art of subtle dominance. Subtle dominance is not about aggression or control. In the crude sense, it's the quiet command of respect, attention, and desire. Imagine James, a 42-year-old investment consultant in London. At a social gathering, women weren't swooning over his wealth or flashy. They were captivated by the way he effortlessly directed conversations, the calm confidence in his posture, the unspoken rule that he set the tone of the interaction without ever imposing it. Women felt the power, yet they didn't feel coerced. This is the essence of subtle dominance. It's authority without arrogance, influence without pressure. Psychologically, women are wired to respond to men who project stability and confidence. Subtle dominance signals that a man is competent, self-assured, and in control of his life. He doesn't need to force affection or attention. It flows naturally because he commands presence. Consider Sophie, a graphic designer in Manchester. She met a man at a local art exhibit who guided the conversation with calm authority. He asked questions, set boundaries, and led with wit. Sophie didn't just enjoy the conversation, she was drawn into it. She was investing energy, mentally and emotionally, without even realizing that it was his subtle dominance creating the attraction. Subtle dominance also plays into the concept of leadership and decisiveness. Women are instinctively drawn to men who can make choices, navigate social situations effortlessly, and maintain control over their environment. This doesn't mean making all decisions. For her, it means demonstrating an inner compass, a clarity that suggests life is unfolding according to purpose, not chaos. When James walked through the streets of London with his friends and Sophie alongside, he naturally took the lead, choosing the cafe, initiating conversation with staff, and navigating crowded spaces calmly. Each action reinforced his dominance without seeming forceful. The key to mastering subtle dominance is balance. Too much assertiveness becomes overbearing. Too little, and you become invisible. Women are subconsciously evaluating whether a man can provide security, stimulation, and challenge simultaneously. Subtle dominance achieves this by blending confidence, control, and charisma. Lucas in Leeds would occasionally introduce playful challenges, small bets, or teasing dares during conversation. These moments reinforced his subtle authority, but framed in a playful, psychologically engaging way. The result? Women felt intrigued, excited, and emotionally invested. It's also about emotional regulation. A man who maintains composure under pressure, handles minor slights with grace, and remains unfazed by social chaos signals emotional maturity. Women unconsciously equate this with high value. When a man projects calm confidence, he becomes a psychological anchor. This is why subtle dominance is more powerful than overt displays of power. It doesn't intimidate, it magnetizes. Practical application in English country settings involves social awareness and environmental control. From networking events in London to casual gatherings in Bristol, subtle dominance is enacted through posture, tone, decision-making, and emotional consistency. You don't need to announce authority. It's perceived, felt, and respected. Women respond because it satisfies a deep-seated psychological need for guidance, challenge, and excitement, all without coercion. Subtle dominance, when combined with the unseen value and tension we explored earlier, creates an almost hypnotic effect. Women begin to focus on your presence over others, comparing every man they meet to the quiet authority you project. They invest emotionally without realizing it, and the choice becomes effortless. They choose you because you have already demonstrated, subtly but consistently, that you are the high-value option. Secret 4. Strategic emotional investment. Strategic emotional investment is perhaps the most powerful weapon in the Machiavellian toolkit. It's not manipulation in a negative sense, it's the calculated distribution of attention, validation, and emotional energy in a way that maximizes desire. Take Daniel, a 35-year-old entrepreneur in Liverpool. He didn't overwhelm women with constant messages or instant compliments. Instead, he selectively engaged, sometimes deeply in conversation, sometimes intriguingly distant. This ebb and flow created emotional dependency, without overt coercion. The psychology is simple yet profound. Humans respond to intermittent reinforcement. Women become emotionally invested when the rewards, the attention, the flirtation, the intellectual connection are unpredictable. The uncertainty triggers the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and creating craving for more. Daniel mastered this in practical ways. He might respond to a text with just enough intrigue to compel a woman to think about him for hours. He might initiate a meaningful conversation at a party, then leave her wanting more, rather than exhausting the encounter. Consider Emma in Manchester, who found herself drawn to Daniel's carefully measured engagement. He would remember small details she mentioned in passing, subtly referencing them later. She didn't realize it, but these tiny acknowledgments made her feel uniquely seen. By selectively investing his emotional energy, Daniel became a scarce resource, and scarcity fuels desire. Women began to prioritize their attention toward him, wondering what he would do next. Strategic emotional investment also involves creating memorable experiences. In Bristol, Daniel once invited a woman to a pop-up art exhibit. Knowing her aesthetic tastes, he didn't overplan. He merely curated an experience that resonated deeply, creating an emotional high that was associated with his presence. Women unconsciously associate these moments with value, competence, and desirability. Another critical aspect is timing. Emotional investment should be paced. Too much too soon creates saturation. Too little creates disinterest. The optimal rhythm keeps women engaged, curious, and always slightly emotionally unbalanced. never neglected, but never fully satisfied. This controlled pacing ensures that their attention remains fixed on you, rather than scattered among many options. Finally, strategic emotional investment builds long-term attachment. Women become invested not just in your immediate attention, but in the trajectory of the relationship. However undefined it may initially be, the psychological pull grows stronger over time as they subconsciously attempt to secure a deeper connection with the high-value, subtly dominant man who strategically invests his emotional energy. Secret 5. The power of psychological contrast. Psychological contrast is the subtle art of making your presence feel more valuable by comparison, often without the woman even realizing it. Imagine Oliver, a 38-year-old architect living in London. At a networking event, he observed how men competed for attention with overt displays, loud jokes, constant interruptions, and trying too hard to impress. Oliver chose a different approach. He allowed other men to exhaust themselves, while he maintained quiet confidence, a calm demeanor, and effortless charm. By the time he spoke with women, his measured energy, attentive listening, and self-assured tone stood in stark contrast to the rest. This principle works because human psychology naturally evaluates people in relative terms. Women unconsciously measure men against their immediate social environment. By creating a psychological contrast, appearing more composed, more confident, and more intriguing than the surrounding options, you position yourself as the standout choice. Emma, a marketing consultant in Manchester, described noticing Oliver at a mutual friend's party. While other men tried too hard, he made the conversation feel effortless yet engaging. The contrast between him and the others made her attention shift almost instantly. Contrast is not just about demeanor. It's also about behavior, timing, and selective engagement. By occasionally withdrawing attention, being mildly elusive, or remaining unfazed by attempts to provoke jealousy, a man can amplify his perceived value. This selective responsiveness signals scarcity, independence, and high self-worth, traits that deeply attract women on a subconscious level. Consider also the contrast in experiences. In Liverpool, Oliver curated conversations that mixed humor with intellectual depth and playful teasing with subtle challenges. Women responded because his personality felt multidimensional, more exciting compared to the predictability or mediocrity of others. This triggers a psychological effect known as contrast bias, where a woman's brain exaggerates your positive traits relative to the environment and social context. Mastering contrast requires restraint. Overdoing it risks coming off as arrogant or manipulative. Done correctly, it's invisible yet undeniable. Women find themselves drawn to your presence, almost involuntarily. In essence, contrast is a silent amplifier. It turns ordinary interactions into memorable experiences and positions you as the superior option without ever claiming it directly. Secret 6. Anchoring desire through controlled mystery. Controlled mystery is one of the most potent tools in Machiavellian dark psychology because it taps directly into the brain's desire for exploration and curiosity. Meet Henry, a 41-year-old entrepreneur from Bristol. He understood that women are naturally intrigued by what they cannot fully grasp. Rather than revealing every detail of his life immediately, he shared selectively small anecdotes, hints of his ambitions, and glimpses of personal passions. This method created a psychological pull. Women were compelled to fill in the blanks, imagine scenarios, and invest emotionally before even realizing it. The psychology behind this is rooted in uncertainty and anticipation. When a woman doesn't have full access to a man's life, her brain starts constructing possibilities. These possibilities are often idealized, and idealization drives attraction. Sophie, a freelance designer in London, described feeling drawn to Henry precisely because he didn't overshare. Every conversation offered hints, an interesting past experience, a passionate hobby, or a fleeting glance into his personal philosophies, but nothing was fully revealed. Her mind became engaged, projecting fantasies and desire onto him. Controlled mystery also leverages selective accessibility, responding to texts with thoughtful timing, leaving small gaps in conversation, or teasing with partial information, increases perceived value. Women subconsciously equate scarcity with desirability, and the more curiosity is piqued, the more attention and emotional energy they invest. Henry also used storytelling to enhance mystery. He would recount moments from travels in London or quiet weekends in the Cotswolds with partial disclosure, enough to intrigue, not enough to satisfy. This created a cognitive pull, a psychological itch that could only be relieved by continued interaction with him. Controlled mystery also signals independence and self-sufficiency. Women perceive a man who is not fully accessible as having a life of value and substance, beyond their attention, a highly attractive trait. The final element is balance. Mystery must never become aloofness or inaccessibility. The goal is to spark curiosity while maintaining a connection, ensuring that the woman feels both intrigued and invested. Controlled mystery is about pacing information, creating anticipation, and using selective revelation to anchor desire. In practical terms, it transforms ordinary interactions in English country contexts, from London cafes to Manchester evenings out, into psychologically compelling experiences. Combined psychological contrast and controlled mystery create a dynamic where women are not just attracted, but deeply engaged. They invest emotionally, mentally, and socially without even realizing the mechanics at play. By mastering these two secrets, a man positions himself as the high-value choice, leaving other options in relative obscurity. Conclusion: the game isn't about chasing, pleading, or competing openly. It's about mastery, strategy, and subtle psychological dominance. By cultivating unseen value, generating tension, controlling narratives, demonstrating selective interest, triggering emotional investment, leveraging social proof, mastering scarcity, mirroring desire, balancing consistency with unpredictability, and maintaining non-reactivity, you shift the dynamic entirely. She no longer sees options. She sees one man who commands attention, sparks desire, and creates emotional dependence without her realizing it. She doesn't just choose, you become her instinctive choice time and time again. Remember, these strategies aren't about manipulation for harm. They're about understanding human psychology, elevating your value, and navigating relationships with clarity and power. Implement them with precision, confidence, and consistency, and you will own the game of desire in ways most men never even imagine possible. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.